Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Dear Masuma, the show that seeks to answer your deepest queries and concerns. My name is Sana Araji and I'm with Masuma Ja'far. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
How are you doing today?
Alhamdulillah, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, it's nice to have you again to answering one of our viewers' questions for us, inshallah. So we're just going to go straight into the question. Obviously do continue sending in your questions to us so we can put them forward to Masuma. And we'll just go straight to this one for you. Okay. Dear Masuma, I want to get married to someone who I know my parents would not accept based on the fact of race. It doesn't matter that he's a good Muslim. I have a job, however, I live with my family. I pay my way and I'm a 26-year-old Islamically speaking. Can I still get married even without their permission? And what steps would I need to take?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The ruling talks about being financially independent, but it also talks about the person being a virgin, so not having any physical relationship with someone. Yeah. It's not so much to do with age, but it's more to do with maturity that comes from financially being independent and being in a relationship. I would actually tell this person, rather than looking at the fiqh, I think what tends to happen is we get caught up on the fiqh. And there's an akhlaqi aspect to it as well. So for example, if you take the roles of men and women, for a woman to be physically available for her husband is a wajib, is there for her as a requirement. For a man to financially take care of his wife is a requirement. But if you only focus on that and do nothing else, that marriage is not going to be a very good marriage. So it's important to look, yes, the foundation should be fiqh, but there's an akhlaqi aspect to it.
Okay.
Islam puts a lot of pressure on and a lot of importance on respect of parents. When Allah says to worship Him, with it comes respect of parents. So it's important to recognize that parents have a huge importance within Islam. And also to recognize that parents don't do things maliciously to their children. They try to do what they think is best for their child. And sometimes they may get it wrong. They're not masum, that they will get it wrong. And just recognize that they're trying to do whatever is best for her. And in this situation, they may not think it's best for her to get married to this person. Now, there should be some sort of conversation between her and her parents to try to figure out why her parents think this way. It may be down to racism, but it may be more than that. It may not be that. It may be that they realize how difficult marriage is, and especially when you have marriage from different cultures coming together.
Okay.
Because as it is, it's like, you've got two different people brought up in two different ways, even within the same culture, but they'll have a different way of looking at things. And when you try to bring that together, there will be lots of clashes. And now if you're bringing in a different culture as well, or a different race, there'll be a totally different way of thinking.
Okay.
And maybe the parents are thinking from that perspective that, you don't realize how difficult your marriage is going to be, and we're trying to save you from that. Right. So it's again having that dialogue. So rather than sort of assuming they're being racist, actually have a conversation with them and ask them why they would not want her to marry. And she's saying that she hasn't actually talked to them. She's just saying that they would not accept based on the fact of race. Again, you don't know. They might surprise you. They might be okay with it. So it's having that conversation is really, really important. I think she needs to have it sooner rather than later.
Okay. So
that they know that this is where her head is at. But at that same time, I think I would advise her to actually tell her parents that the reasons why she wants to marry this guy.
Okay.
But also the fact that she doesn't want to do it without their blessing. So if she says imagine yourself, if your daughter came up to you and said to you, there's a guy that I've met who I want to marry.
Yeah.
Your first question would be, okay, what have you done? Has there been anything haram that's happened here? And if she sort of can tell you, no, there hasn't. Okay. We've made sure that we haven't done anything haram. We've just been talking, and we want, we've realised that we're compatible. We realise we're thinking the same way. We want to get married, but at the same time, and tell them like why and your daughter tells you, he's a really good Muslim, he prays, he fasts, Islam is important to him, God is important to him, he's very God focused, and gives you examples of how he's shown in his life through action that he's a good Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
And then she tells you, but Mum, I'm not going to do this until you're happy.
Okay.
That's already going to put you at ease.
Yeah.
Okay? But then she's going to tell you, but I'm not going to marry anyone else either. So I'm just going to wait for you to be happy.
Right, okay.
So can you see, as a parent, it leaves you with very little choice,
mm-hmm.
but at the same time you don't feel disrespected.
Yeah. Indeed, yeah.
Yeah, and then maybe you can sort of, she can turn around and say, well, why don't you meet him? Why don't you get to know him? And that will then again help you get more comfortable with it.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's how you handle it. If you turn around and say, look, I'm going to marry this guy, I don't care what you think, it doesn't work.
So it's the approach as well, and how you manage it in a way, and kind of saying that I respect you as my parents.
And I want your blessings. It's like your du'as are important to me. I know marriage is going to be tough, and actually maybe sort of saying, rather than waiting for your parents to tell you, actually tell your parents, you know what, I know it's going to be difficult because he's from a different culture.
Okay.
I know there may be some racism because, you know what, I'm going to go into their mosques and I may experience racism. So actually all the concerns that they have, if you actually tell them that you've thought about them, then they're going to not think that you're just going into this blindsided. They're not going to think, oh, she's fallen in love and she really doesn't know anything.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand. It's kind of like she's blinded, but no, she's actually thought about these obstacles that are in her way.
And she's thought of the bigger picture. It's like, you know what, I want to marry him because I think he'll be an amazing father.
Right, okay.
He's got the thing, he's what I'm looking for in order for me to get closer to God.
Okay.
So actually showing that it's not, you're not just attracted by him. There's things that are much, much deeper. You've actually thought about it, and you're mature enough to wait because you understand how important your parents' du'as are.
Okay, and for example, if a daughter approaches her parents in this manner, and she says, I will wait, and she knows in her heart that will be the person that's the only person that she would want to marry. If her parents, after a while, say, yes, he is a good Muslim, yes, he is this, yes, he is all of these things, but because of his race, I'm afraid we just don't think it's compatible. On that basis, what can a daughter do? Obviously, if he's got everything else that is required by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is she allowed to then kind of, say, well, you know what, I respect you parents, but what you're disagreeing on goes against what Allah has allowed.
Yeah.
And
no,
then,
for sure.
How would she do that?
Yeah, so for sure. I mean, like if their concerns are baseless,
right? Okay.
If there is a chance that she may commit a sin if she doesn't get married, then these are all reasons for her to actually then say to her parents, "I'm sorry, I'm going to do this."
Okay.
And I'm sad that you're not behind me.
Right. Okay.
But I think most parents would come around, because if your child is telling you that they're not going to marry anyone else and they're willing to wait, and they're getting older and older and older, you might think, okay, you know what, she'll get past this. And when you see that she doesn't, and you can see that she's getting older, then you're sitting there thinking, well, you know what, her chances of getting married to someone else are decreasing dramatically. Her chances of having children will start decreasing. So, if I really want what's best for them, then I need to maybe allow this.
Okay.
Or you know what, maybe if she gets married and realizes, goes through the difficulties, then she'll realize why I was saying no.
Okay.
Or you might sort of turn around and say, I just pray for her and hope that it works out and allow it. Because if the parent is put in a situation where they really have no choice, I mean, they want to see their daughter get married, they want the best for their daughter, they don't think this is the best, but at the same time, if she's adamant this is what she wants, then they've got to realize that this is her life. And, if she ends up marrying someone else because they've told her to, when there is difficulty in that marriage, she'll want to step away from it because it wasn't her choice ever. Whereas if she marries this person who she's chosen, when there's difficulty in that marriage, she'll actually work harder to make it work, to show her parents that, you know what, it is working. And so it actually may be a successful marriage because of the fact that she wants to prove to her parents that it's working. Yeah,
no, that's a good way of thinking about it, actually. And Islamically, what are the kind of the teachings about marrying from other races?
Well, if you look within the Aima, they in the Holy Prophet, in fact, they all married outside of Arabs. So you have a lot of the imams married women from North Africa. So different culture, different race. Totally different. It's nothing to do with the Arabs at all. And again, I think the beautiful thing is like you're bringing two cultures together, you're bringing two families together, and you're learning from each other's cultures and taking the positive from each other's cultures to maybe, sort of adapt something into your family which wouldn't have been there if you just stuck to your own culture.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. I think it's beautiful, and I think we need to start looking past these differences that we have due to our color or our race or our culture, but actually look at the concept of Islam that's binding us.
Right, okay.
It's like, we're sisters in faith. It doesn't matter where you come from or where you were born or what color your skin is. It's the fact that we both believe in the same God, the same Quran, the same Holy Prophet. That's what binds us.
Okay, and like where did this this racism occur? Like, when did it happen, and where did it come from? As in, why was it such an issue, or even now in today's day and age, why is it such an issue for some parents to accept their child marrying someone from a different, culture?
I think there's lots of different reasons. One could be honestly down to the parent being worried that it's going to make the marriage more difficult.
Right.
It can actually make the marriage easier. If you look at it from the perspective of culture has a lot of baggage that comes with it. There's a lot of positives in culture, there's no doubt about that, but there's a lot of negatives that come with it as well. And sometimes when you marry within the same culture, you don't question, you don't grow, you just accept because you both have grown up with that.
Okay.
And again, even if you think you're marrying from the same culture, that culture is diluted dependent on where you're brought up. So for example, I've been brought up in the West. So my culture has been diluted very much, and I've taken on a lot of the Western culture.
Yeah.
My husband was brought up in East Africa.
Okay.
So he has a lot of the culture from back home.
Okay.
And I remember when we got married, there were things that I would do, which I would think was totally normal growing up in the West, which he would think, how can you do that?
Okay.
And I would be, but is it wrong Islamically? And he's like, no, but it's wrong. It's just wrong. And and then having those conversations and actually getting him to question why he thought it was wrong if it wasn't wrong Islamically, getting me to question why I'm so accepting of it. Okay. And actually coming to, there was a point, especially when we decided to have children, it's like we actually sat down and thought, okay, you know what? We need to be on the same page. And the only way we can be on the same page is if we look at the religion and what God tells us as the foundation of our decision making, not the culture.
Yeah.
And then we can sort of sit there and say, okay, you know what, I'm more comfortable with this and I'm less comfortable with that. But the foundation is the religion. And that made us much more God-focused. And if I'd married someone who had grown up here, I wouldn't have had that because we would have been thinking the same way, and maybe it would have been the culture that was our focus rather than God.
Right, okay.
Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So it can actually make it more powerful because you're clashing on everything else. So it's like if these two people come together and they're from a different race and they have a different culture, they may actually be clashing in what they think is acceptable or not. And so they say, okay, you know what? Let's take it back to God. Let's make God our focus, where He dictates what's right and what's wrong, and anything else is up for discussion.
Yeah,
and we can actually discuss it.
But the way you've done it, that's very clever and it's beneficial. But I think a lot of people, they might not even think of doing something like that, or they're too stubborn, or to kind of let go of certain cultural things that they want to do. And I guess that's where the clash can come.
Yeah, and that's the problem. It's like I think a lot of the times we do things without question because that's what we've been brought up with.
Okay.
And again, it's not necessarily always right. And it's when you question it that you realise that the flaws in it. A lot of people I know, when I talk to them, and it's like they've sort of moved away from Islam, and when you actually discuss it with them, it's not Islam that they had a problem with. It's all the cultural stuff within it, which was brought within Islam, classified as Islam, but it wasn't. And when you actually tell them that, they're like, oh, but I thought that's what we believe. And I'm like, no, that's what the culture's telling you. That's not what God's telling you.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying culture's bad. There is a lot of positives that come out of culture. Like for instance, within a lot of the cultures from back home, the respect that we show to our parents and the respect that we show to the elders is much more than the Western culture teaches us. You know, and again, rather than just accepting it, actually, when we talk about it, actually sort of come from the perspective of, okay, that's important. But you know what? God actually tells us to respect our elders. God actually tells us to respect our parents. And they don't have to earn our respect. That is given to them by God.
Yeah.
Now that's much more powerful than the culture tells me to do it.
Yeah. And on that point, what are the rights of the parents when it comes to marriage?
So if the woman is under her father's protection, and like he's taking care of her, then she needs to have his permission.
Okay.
Financial independence is part of the independence that you have from your family, but that's not the only thing that's there. It, as I said, it's about actually being in a relationship beforehand as well.
Right. Okay.
So again, that right has been given to the father not to abuse, but because as a man he knows how men think and behave, and as a woman, because I have been protected in my father's home, I'm not so weary of, you know, I don't know how men can play me to a certain extent. So that's where I trust my father to take care of me.
Okay.
I think, you know, again, growing up in the West, a lot of the times we're taught that, you know, I don't need protection. I can take care of myself. I think it's beautiful that my father wants to protect me. I think it's beautiful that my husband wants to protect me. Why would I want to abandon that? You know, it doesn't make me any less. In fact, it makes me very valuable because they care enough about me to protect me. And it doesn't mean that I'm, you know, any less of a human being. It's just I have a different role. My husband has a different role. My father has a different role. My mother has a different role. You know, we've been put into these gender bodies to play out a specific role. And as a woman, I deserve to be respected a certain way. I deserve to be treated a certain way. I deserve to be taken care of a certain way. And rather than trying to fight that and say, no, I want the same rights as a man, which really achieves nothing, because if you think about it, a lot of the times we fight for the same rights as a man, but then we also carry out all the things that we tend to do as women. So we'll go out to work and we want to be treated like a man, but then when we come home, we still have to take care of the kids and cook and do all of this. And we end up the ones who are losing out because we're trying to be everything and anything.
Yeah, we're trying to do both sides at the same time.
Exactly. And I know sometimes we have to go to work, and I know, you know, it's needed and everything, and I'm not saying we shouldn't. What I'm saying is recognize that there are certain things that's innate in me, like the nurturing aspect. It's innate in me.
Yeah.
So why fight it? Yeah. You know, to go out to work and take care of the family and protect the family is innate in a man. That's why God's created us. And so, you know, let each play out their role. And if we need to sort of step in each other's boundaries and help each other out, why? Of course we should.
Okay. And in regards to the mother, like what would be the mother's right in or her say in her daughter's marriage and all of this?
She would be advising the daughter.
Okay.
From a woman's perspective, how difficult marriage is.
Right.
She would be talking to the father, because again, I think for a father to let go of his daughter is really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And so maybe he's being a lot more unreasonable than the mother would be.
Right, okay.
So actually sort of knocking some sense into him by talking to him and saying, look, she has to get married, and
try to persuade him.
Exactly. And sort of, you know, sort of be the logical, rational sort of voice, where he's, although men are not supposed to be emotional, I think when it comes to their daughters, they very much are. Yeah. And it's very difficult for them to find someone who they think is suitable for their amazing daughter. And it's again, the mother sort of would be saying, look, you know what, you've got to give her some space, you've got to allow her to make her decisions, and also, you know, you will advise her and things like that. So I think you play it together. Okay, so it's kind of like a team type of team job, really, isn't it, between the two, balancing. Exactly. And like, you know, with in terms of the race aspect of that, I feel, I don't know, some parents can be a bit difficult in terms of race. What, I mean, I know you've briefly discussed it, but what can the daughter do to try to fully kind of convince them that, you know,
this person is, you know, the right person, or maybe educate them more regarding race?
I think a lot of the times people are racist because of ignorance.
Right, okay.
Of what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So again, if she makes sure that this person that she wants to marry is introduced to her family, spend some time with her family, with her parents, they'll actually be able to see what sort of person he truly is.
Okay.
I think that'll make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And also maybe sort of talking it through from a religious perspective, and, you know, how can you be racist? If this is to be racist is totally against Islam, how are you okaying this?
Okay.
And having those conversations where you're actually pulling them up on something that they're doing, because there's a difference between respecting and accepting everything your parents do. You know,
Right.
Respect is not obedience.
Mm-hmm.
Your obedience is to Allah only. Respect is where you will try to make them happy, try to do what they want, but when it comes, you know, when it comes to a stage where it's against God's rulings or against God's wishes, then obviously you wouldn't listen to them.
Yeah.
So if they're actually doing something that is against God's wishes, and they're actually, showing racism, or you know, they have racism within them, then I think it is the duty of the daughter to then pull them up on that, but do it in a respectful way.
Yeah, indeed, and maybe ask a close relative to have a discussion with them, or I know, to talk on her behalf, because sometimes it can be easier for someone else, maybe like an uncle or an auntie or something.
Yeah, but again, be very careful that how it comes across as well, because it's like you don't want the parents to think that you've gone and complained about them to someone else.
Yeah, no, of course.
Yeah,
it has to be all in a very respectful
exactly,
kind of
exactly. And I think a lot of the times, if you handle it yourself, it's showing your maturity.
Yeah.
And it's you're not losing it, you're not emotional, you know. And again, here maybe it's sort of, it'll help you to grow and sort of recognize why you want to marry this person. So actually having that conversation with them to tell them why you're marrying this person, what you think are the positives of the marriage, what you think will be the difficulties in the marriage. You know, it'll actually crystallize it in your own mind, which will help your marriage going forward as well.
Okay, inshallah. Thank you so much for that, Masuma. It is, again, one of those tricky conversations. Unfortunately, it does exist at times, racism, but inshallah, may Allah guide us all, and we'll pray for the sister or anyone else that might have similar situations. Inshallah, whatever Allah plans will happen. And again, do send us in your questions, personal questions that relate to yourself, or just general questions, and we will pass it on to Sister Masuma, inshallah, to answer it for you. And again, thank you for joining us today. Thank you as well. And inshallah, we'll see you again for another episode of Dear Masuma. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.